Evening, everyone. Thank you for showing up tonight. I'm Debbie Schwartz, founder of Road to College and the Paying for College 101 Facebook group, and I am here tonight with Kat Delgrasso. Let me just, Kat, I'm gonna spotlight you so it's easier for people to see. Okay, great. And a few more people are coming in through the waiting room, but we're going to get started because I know Kat has a lot to say tonight in a good way. So, um, before we get started, I always like to thank College Ave, who is our partner and is sponsoring tonight's event. Kat is the head of campus and event development at College Ave, but she has tremendous experience in financial aid and has worked for the College Board, and she'll actually share a little bit more about her background. But College Ave is always dedicated to helping families find flexible and straightforward solutions for paying for college. And as you will hear more about them throughout the year, they sponsor other webinars, and particularly in the April through August timeframe, they are extremely helpful in talking to families and helping to find the best solutions if you need to pursue a private student loan. So with that, let me pass it off to Kat, who will be presenting and answering questions tonight about financial aid. And I'm sorry, Kat, one more thing. Before, let me just give a little bit of housekeeping about tonight's session. As with all of our webinars, this is recorded. A link will be sent out to everybody who registered tomorrow, so you can review anything that you missed or just you want to watch it again because there'll be a lot of information. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. Also, always love to start off with, if you want to share in the chat where you're watching from and what year in either high school or college your student is, because we have families that range, in both areas. We always love to know who's out there. And again, feel free to ask your questions. We will answer a lot. We tend to do that. And I will maybe interrupt Kat a little bit, but with some questions if it's appropriate, but if not, we will scan through them at the end. Okay, I'm passing it to you, Kat.
There you go. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you, Debbie, for hosting us tonight. I have basically worked in the field of financial aid for a very long time. I currently work at College Ave Student Loans for the past 7 years or so. But I also worked at the College Board for, well, about 7 years too. And I worked at a couple of college campuses, including Syracuse University and the University of Rochester in upstate New York. And I worked in student loans quite a bit over my history as well at a previous time in my career. So I've been around for over 30 years doing talking about financial aid in some capacity. So hopefully I will be able to answer all your questions tonight. And Debbie's really good about monitoring that chat and getting you the answers, and if or asking me for some of the answers. So I thought it might be helpful to start with a very general question of what is financial aid. So it's in our title tonight. So what is it? And the easiest way to describe it, I find, is really it's money that's going to discount your cost of attending college. So it's basically like you see a sticker price, if you subtract from it financial aid, and that is essentially a discount off of what you're going to be paying. So that to me is one of the easiest ways to think about it. And some of it is based on need, but it's not always based on need. So I'll go over the types of financial aid tonight, and we'll talk about it and hopefully get you the answers you need. So that's my definition of what financial aid is. All right, so here are some common misconceptions. I always like to go through this because, as I said, I used to work in financial aid, and we talked to a lot of, I talked to a lot of families over the years. And, some families feel like they won't qualify for financial aid because they do think it's all need-based, or, and that's not true. So I just want to make sure that you know that when you apply for financial aid, at minimum, you would qualify for federal student loans, but you may qualify for things that you didn't even think you could qualify for. So glad you're here tonight. Another misconception is that people think either their income is too high to qualify or too low to qualify. So again, it's always good to apply, and you won't know unless you apply as to whether or not you would be eligible for something. So apply and see what happens. Also, a lot of families, I used to work at the two private colleges and universities, and they were pretty high ticket price. So some families think, always, when I worked there, some families thought for sure, well, we don't know if we can even afford this because it's a private school and the sticker price is higher, and should we even bother applying to those types of places? And the answer is yes, because sometimes private colleges and universities end up having very substantial financial aid available. Yes, their costs is higher most times, but it's sort of all relative in terms of financial aid. So you might be very surprised that you would end up qualifying for aid that would end up making your cost of going there similar to what the state school is in your state, or at least comparable. So don't count yourself out of those types of schools because honestly, a lot of them have endowed scholarships that they do give out. Even though they're more expensive, they may be able to reduce your cost more than you think. There's no, another common misconception is that there's no deadline to apply. There definitely are deadlines, and some of them are a little bit more stringent than others. So I'll talk a little bit about that tonight. I have a slide on that. So you want to make sure that you are meeting all deadlines on applications. At each individual school that you're applying to, just making sure that you're keeping track and you know what's what, because you definitely don't want to miss any deadlines. So that is a misconception. And then the last one I have on here is that a lot of families will say, do I have to fill out like the FAFSA application or the free application for federal student aid every year that you know, my son or daughter is going to college? And unfortunately, you do have to apply for financial aid every year. So sorry to deliver that bad news. But at the current time in my entire history of being in this field, you've had to apply every year. So it's not too bad, but it just wanted to make sure and set the stage on that as well. All right, so I'm going to break down some things tonight. What's included in the cost of college? Like what are they taking into account at the schools? How does the financial aid process work? Where does the money come from? And how will I know how much I get? So let's go into that. All right, so first of all, there are some financial aid is full of acronyms. There's a lot of acronyms in the field. So I'm just going to give you a few that are relevant and things that you might hear often, or just you need to be, like you'll win a prize at a trivia contest if you know these acronyms. So first of all, COA. So you might hear people talking about the COA, which is essentially the cost of attendance. And that really, what that means is it's the sticker price. So it's kind of like if you went to buy a car and you saw the price of a car, it's along those same lines. The car includes things like windshield wipers and, maybe floor mats and the engine and the brakes and all those things. The overall sticker price is kind of similar over here on the higher education side. The cost includes a bunch of things, and COA is the acronym for that. So I'm going to use that acronym throughout these slides. So remember that one. The next one is CSS. So CSS stands for College Scholarship Service, and that is essentially I'm going to talk a little bit tonight about a secondary application to apply for financial aid that is administered by the College Board, and it's called the CSS profile. And a lot of people ask me, what does CSS mean? And so it's kind of an old name that they've had since the 50s, the 1950s. And so just essentially think of it as the College Board's application. It's called the CSS profile. I'll talk a little bit about that too. FSA. So FSA means federal student aid. They are the ones that are processing your federal financial aid application and the types of aid you might be eligible for through the government, the federal government. So that's FSA is part of the Department of Education. PJ. PJ means professional judgment. So if you needed any kind of special consideration, let's say for a job loss or something like that, you would essentially be requesting a quote unquote professional judgment or PJ if something happened like that. So PJ might be something you hear over time here. And then lastly, a big one is called SAI, and that is stands for the Student Aid Index. And that is a unique number to you that is based on when you file the federal form for financial aid, it's a number that is calculated. It's basically like a family contribution that's calculated when you file that form. So SAI is something you'll definitely hear as you're looking forward over the next few years in terms of applying for financial aid. So it's a unique number to you based on what you've completed on your form. Okay, so let's talk about the COA, or the cost of attendance. So these are the five main components within the cost of attendance at a college. So each college and university is required to have each of these components within their cost. So for example, tuition and fees tends to be the largest dollar amount of your cost of attendance. If it's not the largest, it's the second largest behind food and housing. So food and housing would be either having a meal plan on campus or or if the student is living off campus, food would be, going to the grocery store and, still have to account for food within their cost of attendance because obviously the student has to eat. And then housing could be on-campus dorms or apartments, or it could be living off campus and paying a landlord. So the colleges and universities are required to take into account tuition they're charging, any fees they're charging, food and housing, however however the student's living, they're basically having to take that into account. And then, of course, their books and any supplies and things like that they're required to have for their program. And it is an average amount, so it's not unique to a particular student, student A, student B, student C, but it's an average that they use to take that into account. And personal expenses is an average amount that they are using as well, and transportation. So all of these five components are used to figure out how much financial aid you're eligible for. So I just want to make sure you're aware, because I do certainly have had a lot of families over time who say, well, are you taking into account the fact that my child is enrolled in a program that requires, I don't know, let's say an expensive camera because they're in a photography, type of program or something like that? Or are you taking into account that my child's going to college, 4 states away, and we have transportation costs of getting them to and from your school? So anyway, all of these things are taken into account, and that's a good thing for you because it means that they're kind of using like the maximum type of number when they're figuring out how much eligibility you have for financial aid. Okay, a couple more things I wanted to make sure and tell you about the COA, the cost, is that it does vary at each institution. So let's say if you go to, a 2-year public school, like a community college versus a 4-year public school, like a state school in your state, versus a 4-year private school or a proprietary school, like a trade school, things like that. They all have different costs of attendance. Those costs can increase every year for sure. I mean, I think in general, food and housing goes up every year just in life, regardless of where we are. But also tuition and fees tend to increase on average, maybe 2 to 4% on average. It depends. Some schools have policies where they freeze the tuition for you in year 1. You can certainly ask about that. And even if they don't freeze it, maybe ask them, what's your average increase, for tuition every year? when you're looking at different schools. Also, the schools are taking into account basic costs needing to attend college at that particular school. It's, as I said, there's averages that are used. So it may not be unique to you versus student B and C when they're looking at, let's say, personal expenses like buying toothpaste and buying, bedspreads to so you have something for your dorm sheets and pillowcases and things like that. But they're using averages to be able to come up with a good number. They also are required to take into account that the student can eat 3 meals a day. So they are not shorting you on that. They are required by federal law to use 3 meals a day, 7 days a week in their cost of attendance as well. And then they are also required to include in your cost the cost of any kind of licensure or certification or a first credential. Let's say, for example, maybe, I don't know, a nursing student or something that has some sort of a license as part of their cost, as associated maybe with the hospital they're working in or something as part of the program. If there's anything like that that's required, then it's required to be considered in the cost of attendance. And that way it's more fair to you because they're, as I said, using like the maximum worst case scenario when they're figuring out how much aid eligibility you have. Okay, so when you're looking to compare college costs, I would recommend using some kind of tool. I'm showing you something here on the left that looks like, okay, it's something College Ave created that we give out to families that allows them to compare the cost of 3 different schools. And really, I just want to show you this so you understand the concept of, if you want to use a spreadsheet or write it down on paper, whatever you want to do, but you need some sort of mechanism to, if you're looking at more than one college, which most people do, or a lot of people do, you want to be able to compare, okay, what is the cost at school A or 1, 2, and 3 minus any kind of free money I'm getting through grants and scholarships, minus, any loans I can obtain or work programs that are allowing the student to get a little help. And then at the bottom line, what is my net price? So I would recommend having some sort of way to do that, whether you're looking at this piece on the left and trying to use some concept like that. You certainly could get this on the College Ave website, or you could use Excel, or paper or whatever, you'd like. But I recommend doing that. It'll keep you more organized, when it comes down to crunch time and you're deciding where to go. On the right-hand side, I'm mentioning net price calculators. So net price calculators are required by the Department of Education to have on every school's website. Usually it's on the financial aid site, part of the site. Well, I would say it's always honestly, it's always on the net, on the financial aid part of the site, but sometimes you'll also find it under admissions part of the site. You could honestly just Google it. So you could just say, net price calculator, Syracuse University, and it'll come right up. So there's also a central location you can use, that the government put together, and it's right here, the collegecost.ed.gov/net price. You can use that to get your way to the different net price calculators at all the schools. So you could try that as well, if you don't want to do it individually by school. Okay, so how is financial aid calculated? So basically, this is sort of it in a nutshell. It's the cost of attendance minus the SAI. Remember, that was the student aid index I mentioned earlier, in my acronym slide, which is essentially like a calculated family contribution. And so you subtract family contribution from the cost, and that is essentially the amount of money that you need. So it looks so simple, but the truth of the matter is that it varies so much at schools, and that's what makes some of this very confusing, because by the time you go to apply for a college, you've got some schools that, well, first of all, they're all going to have a different cost of attendance to the dollar. They're going to be a little bit obviously different. And then at the bottom line, therefore, your need is calculated to be a different number. So the other confusing thing is that some schools use two different formulas to calculate your need. One for determining federal financial aid, and the other one for determining money that they're going to give you from their own school. So it can be very confusing, which is why it's good for you to kind of start learning this stuff right now, because it just, you're getting some education here before you delve into it all, and then you'll hopefully be better off in terms of what questions to ask when you are talking to a specific college. Okay, so here are the financial aid applications. This is the main one. This is the FAFSA, which I've alluded to already today. It's free. Don't use any other website other than studentaid.gov. If somebody's asking you to pay to fill out a FAFSA, back up and find this website because you won't have to pay to do the FAFSA. Okay, so make sure you're using studentaid.gov. That's the official website. It is available October 1st every year. So it's technically available next Wednesday for students who are entering or looking for financial aid for next fall of 2026 or spring of 2027. Technically, that form is available early. They have a beta test going on right now. And if you file your FAFSA now, which you're welcome to do, they are kind of using that as test applications. It will be official, so you won't have to file it again if you do decide to file it before October 1st. Or quite frankly, you could wait and let them work any bugs out that they might have. And, it's the first day that it's available, but it's available for many months beyond that. So it's actually available like for a really long time beyond that. So really, you don't have to rush to do it on October 1st. You don't have to rush to do it after we get off of this call, because what you really need to care about are the deadlines of the colleges. So October 1st, yes, it launches and it's out early now, but your deadline isn't October 1st to file it for financial aid. So don't feel pressured by that day. Just know that it is there if you want to give it a try and practice with it. So the FAFSA will calculate what's the SAI that I've mentioned tonight. And that number you will actually see posted on a summary that you're given. Okay, so that's the first application. Oh, and also that is required by every college and university in the country, almost. There's a few colleges out there that don't participate in the federal aid programs, but to be honest with you, most schools do. So the FAFSA you definitely need to complete. The second type of application that you may have to complete for certain institutions, certain colleges, is called the CSS profile. Again, the College Scholarship Service profile administered by the College Board. You can use your same login that you do when if the student did the SAT or the PSAT or AP classes, you can use the same login to get into the CSS profile. That one is also launching October 1st for the fall of 2026 financial aid eligibility. So fall of 26, spring of 27, that time frame. So the CSS profile calculates a family contribution as well. It's not called the SAI because it's the College Board's form, so they don't call it the same thing. And the number isn't the same either. The family contribution is going to come out a little bit different because they actually ask for more information than the FAFSA. So therefore, the bottom line number is not going to be the same. The CSS profile doesn't tell you the number at the end of it, but the school is given that information. So that's the second form. So let me go over here quickly I just want to show you. So here's the federal student aid site. Again, it's studentaid.gov there. You can look at the top. And this is where you do your FAFSA right here on the right-hand side. Fill out a FAFSA form. So you're going to go into that. And then you can see here where you can start a form for 26-27. Again, even though it's before October 1st, if you do the FAFSA now, you're welcome to. You're just kind of one of their beta testers. So again, if there's any bugs that come out from their form, you know, you're kind of doing it as a test subject, if you will, but that's fine. You can try it or you can wait a little bit. The CSS profile site is this. So it's got the purpley color. Make sure you're clicking on the right year. So right here, you're saying sign in for 26, 27. Over here, you're going to see sign in for 25, 26. Don't apply for 25, 26 because that is the current year we're sitting in right now. So if you are applying for a student in high school, you definitely don't want that. You want to do the one that is highlighted here on the left with the white oval. Okay. Let me go back over here. Okay. Lastly, there are a handful of colleges that will use an institutional application. Um, it- it's not a lot of schools, but it's typically it's schools that they don't use the CSS profile to get extra information, but they want to give you an opportunity to give them some additional information on there, so they might require it, but they usually wouldn't charge you a fee for it. The FAFSA, so I didn't say this about the profile, but there is a fee associated with the CSS profile. It's $25 for one application, one school. And then if you're applying to multiple colleges that use it, it's an additional $16 for each additional college. They do give fee waivers for the CSS profile if your income is $100,000 or less. And so, there's a lot of people who get a fee waiver. I think they use the number of like around 40% get a fee waiver. Don't quote me on that, but I mean it's a large percentage of people who get fee waivers. $100,000 or less is their cutoff for that. So free application is free. CSS profile has a fee unless your income's less than 100,000. The institutional applications, if the school uses it, is usually free.
Pat, before you go on, because there's some
Yes.
questions about this, maybe to clear it up.
Yeah.
You explained how FAFSA is in beta now and it officially opens October 1st.
Uh-huh.
And then there are people asking, saying that they've heard from their high school that they should be filling out FAFSA as soon as possible, like as soon as it opens. And, we kind of said you don't have to do that. Like, maybe can you explain why it might be important for some, like, in what cases would you want to fill it out kind of as soon as you can? And then why is it okay to wait a little bit?
Yeah. First of all, there's no harm in filling it out sooner than later. Here's why. Because it's based on income for a tax year that is already over. It's for if you're applying for the fall of 26, it's based on the tax year of 2024. So it's not like waiting is going to matter in terms of you knowing like, oh, I don't have, my pay stub, I'm still earning income. It's not 2025 income. It's looking at 2024 income. So in that sense, it's like there's no harm in filling it out in terms of income. Let's say, for example, you have here's an example where I would, well, first of all, you fill out the income. The income is going to come from your tax year, and so that's cut and dry. The assets are based on whatever your assets are as of today. So the day you file it. So if for some reason you're getting ready to buy a house and you have a large amount of money sitting in your assets, okay, I'd probably wait so that the day that I actually file it, because that money is going towards, whatever else you've kind of earmarked it for. So that might be an example. Also, applying early will help you to make sure that you're meeting deadlines. So sometimes there could be first come, first serve for maybe certain college related monies that are available to you. Also, merit-based financial aid, which is academic or talent-based financial aid. Some colleges want the FAFSA, even if you're applying just for the merit-based stuff. So, you want to get in there before, you don't want to be cutting it close to a deadline. I would say if I were you, I would want the comfort of knowing that I I well met the deadline. It's like, okay, good. Now I don't have to stress because it's in way before the deadlines that the colleges need this stuff. So if the college has a deadline of like November 15th for if you're applying early decision, why not do it sooner than later? Because that's right around the corner. So those are types of examples.
What about
What
what
about,
about state aid?
say it again?
State. What about state aid?
So state aid. So here's an interesting thing about state aid, and I do have the link in this PowerPoint. Some of the state deadlines are very early. They're not going to be like October 1 early. They're going to be they give you time. A lot of them will base their they actually use the FAFSA as the application for the state aid. So when we say state aid, we're talking about like grants that you can get from the state where you reside. So if you live in New York, their state grant is called New York State TAP Program. And you want to make sure you are applying so you can be considered for the New York State TAP program, which is a need-based program. Most of these things are either they're need-based. Some of them, I guess, are merit-based, but a lot of them are need-based. So you want to make sure that you're meeting whatever your state's deadline is. So what I would recommend is, and I do have this link in the PowerPoint, but if you go under that studentaid.gov site, so again, I'll show you the example here. At the main page, studentaid.gov, you go under grants and loans. And let's see, where is it in here? I think it's in here, grants, work study loans. It's, I should just cheat and look at my, hold on, I'm going to go to my PowerPoint for that. State. Okay, studentaid.gov. It's under apply for aid and then FAFSA deadlines. Okay. FAFSA deadlines here. So it's under the main heading of FAFSA form, FAFSA deadlines. And then in here, you'll see your state listed. So if you're from California, you'll see here what they've got going on. Some states have like a bunch of programs, like, they don't just have one, they have a couple different things. So, but you can see here, like Delaware, May 15th. I know that like Illinois is one of them. I don't know why they have this there, but like, as soon as possible after October 1. I don't know if I would trust that deadline because it doesn't have, like, that's a weird old date in there. But if I were you, I would at least use this site and then go directly to, you can also Google, let's say, for example, you're from Indiana. You could Google Indiana State Grant Program, and that will get you to their state grant programs, and then you can kind of look on their actual sites. Because keep in mind, this is the federal government site. They're basically trying to say, hey, here's all the state grant deadlines here for you. But I don't know, I wouldn't trust this right here because it's got an old date on there. But at least it's a place to start to know kind of most of the time states do not change their deadlines. They kind of like, okay, every year Iowa, every year like New York State, I'll use New York again. Their deadline is June 30th of the following year. I know because I used to work in New York that they offer you ample time to apply. Like they're giving you like a year and 3/4 to apply for their program for 26, 27. Whereas there are some states in here that are like they don't allow you that much at all. Oh, here's one. Like renewal applicants in New Jersey, submit your application by April 15th of 2026 by 11 p.m. Central Time. Like they're very specific. So I just want you to be careful of things because some of them with earlier dates like that, like once you miss it, they're not going to review you for it's a pretty strict cutoff in the states, I think, on average. So, I sorry to ramble a little bit on that, but I wanted to at least try to show you the visual here. Worst case scenario, I also know that if you go to NASFA.org is kind of like our Financial Aid Administrator Association. And I did this earlier today where I Googled NASFA state financial aid, and they actually had a pretty nice summary here. So it's again, it's NASFA, NASFAA. Maybe Debbie can pop that in the chat for me. And if you click on state financial aid programs there, look, they have a map, and then you can just click on any of these things and you can get directly to, like this one was Colorado. It gets me directly to Colorado's grant program. And so I think this is a safe bet also because I like the map there. If we're just depending on the federal site, it clearly may or may not be updated. So. But I do kind of like this whole map where you just click on your state. So again, it's NASFA.org. Well, it's NASFA State Financial Aid, and then you'll see that. You'll get to that map. So did that help, Debbie? I'm sorry. Went down a rabbit
Yes,
hole there.
yes, yes.
Sorry about that.
I think it did. I think.
Okay. Well, interrupt me anytime. So here's the gist of what you're going to need to do for applying in general. So you know that you're going to have to do one or more of these applications. One is the FAFSA, maybe the CSS profile, or maybe the institutional app. So what are the main steps? So you look at the deadlines for each college, you go to their website and you figure out, again, just Google it, Chat GPT, whatever you want to do, and say, okay, what is the financial aid deadline for Villanova University? And you'll be able to get directly to the school's website more quickly there. You're going to file the FAFSA. You can choose up to 20 colleges when you file it. So that should be enough for most of you. Believe me, if you have too many choices, you're going to have a hard time narrowing it down later on. So don't really recommend going over 20, but I know sometimes that happens. Whatever the case is, if for some reason you have 21 schools or more that you are interested in, you have to file it with 20 and then go back later and remove one and add one because they only allow 20. So like when you've decided, you know what, we're not really interested in school number 6 anymore, we'll go back in and remove that one and we'll add this other one. So you can do that, but it's not a problem, but you just can't add 21 at a time. Then you're going to file the CSS profile for any of the schools that are requesting that. They don't have a maximum number of schools on their application. I want to show you here on the CSS profiles page. If this is the main page, go down here on the left, just about halfway down, not even, and it says check the participating schools. When you go into there, you'll see if your school is listed as to which ones require it or don't. So we've got, CSS profile for domestic students, international students, and non-custodial parents would be like in a divorce separated situation. So see if, you could just go down the drop-down list and pick, Baylor University in Texas. Yep, they require it for domestic, international, and non-custodial. And if your school's not on this list, it means they don't require it. Or if they do require it, they are not publicly listed on here and they might ask you for it separately, but it's not likely that they would use it. Most people, if they use it, they're putting themselves on this drop-down box. Okay, and then you're going to, so you're applying, and then once you get your financial aid offer from the colleges, you're going to compare them. And then you're going to say, okay, I'm going to get an award letter. If you look at the top right here, that picture, or the side, I mean, the side on the right, it says University Award Letters, like a little graphic there. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get either electronically and or in paper form. Sometimes they do both. You'll get an award letter, award notification. But either way, they usually have like the word award in it or offer, financial aid offer, that type of thing. They're all the, it's basically what you'll receive after you've applied for the financial aid at the schools. Then you're going to make the decision of where to go. And so that is something that you would, sort of requires, that you kind of look at. Remember back here when I showed you the comparing college cost graphic on the left? This is where you'll sit down and say, okay, what are we going to do? We've got offers from 10 schools. How are we going to narrow this down? The only way to narrow it down is to figure out, A, is it the right fit for us academically? Is it the right fit for us financially? Is it the right fit socially? Like, do I feel like the love, when I go to, when we visited the school, do I feel it? Or does the student feel it, basically? Because you've got to have like all those things as a fit. It's not just financial, but it's all those things. So that's what you're going to do last. And then you're going to let them know, let the one know that you're interested in. So any questions, Debbie? I'll stop for a sec.
Um, oh, you know what? I think we've got questions, but they're a little bit more detailed. I think they'd be better when asked
Okay.
later on.
Okie dokie. All right. So where does the money come from? So there are four main sources, and they are money from the colleges and the universities directly. So it's usually that's usually, well, I won't say that just yet. Colleges and universities. Second source is federal government. Third source is your home state, so your state type of government aid. And lastly, other, other categories. So let me go through these four. All right, the first category, the money that comes from the schools, is either grants, scholarships, campus jobs, or maybe loans from this college directly, but those are usually pretty limited in nature, so you won't see those as much. So the grants are either need-based, or well, the grants are usually need-based. The scholarships are really more the merit or academic-based, athletic-based, talent-based, a lot of academic scholarships really are probably the main types in athletic, I guess. So those are the types of, those are the things that you would see if you're getting money directly from the college themselves. The second one would be the money from the government, federal government. All of these require you to fill out the FAFSA, so you can't get any of these without applying on the FAFSA at minimum. And quite frankly, a lot of times, if you want to be considered for the college, any of these things, you have to do the FAFSA anyway, because the school isn't typically going to give you their own money either without you filling out the FAFSA. Unless, it's sometimes yes, but it's most of the time they want you to fill it out if you want any kind of money from them. Okay, so the federal side, there's different things. There's Pell Grants. SEOG stands for Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. Work study, those are basically campus jobs where a percentage of your paycheck is actually funded from the government, so it's actually called federal work study. And then direct subsidized loans. So those are need-based loans that are from the government, the federal government, that are subsidized while the student is enrolled in school, which means that there's no interest accruing on that type while the student is in school. The other types of federal aid at the bottom here are not based on need or the SAIs, that student aid index. And those are things like the post 9/11 GI Bill, the veterans benefits. There is a student loan called direct unsubsidized loans. So that's not a need-based portion of the type of loan. Like the subsidized loan is not accruing interest during school, but the unsubsidized loan is. But nonetheless, it's available. The Parent Plus loans, which stands for the Parent Loan for Undergraduate Students. That is not based on need. Does require you to do you have to do the FAFSA to get the Federal Plus loan. And then Teach Grants are for upcoming, basically students who are looking to become teachers. There's a program called the Federal Teach Grant as well. Third category was the money from your state. So a lot of times, I mentioned this already, but a lot of times the FAFSA is the application for it. But sometimes like a state might not use it as the application, but at the end of the FAFSA, so like at the very end, let's say I'm sitting here tippy tap, I'm filling out my FAFSA, and then when I submit it at the end, it says, okay, now you can go on and do your state application from here. So it's convenient in that it either is the FAFSA application that they want, period, or at the very end of the FAFSA, then you'd kind of move into the next step of applying for state aid immediately following, like while you're sitting there on screen there. So look for that. The amount of money that comes from your home state will vary, but some schools are, or excuse me, some, sorry, some states are quite generous in terms of the, thousands of dollars that they provide. And so, but every state in the country, the US does have a state grant program now. So there's at least something out there to take a look at. So just make sure you're applying. And there are some states that allow you to cross state lines where, let's say, for example, you're going to school, you're from whatever state you're from, and then if you go to an adjacent state, they let you take it over state lines. But some states don't let you do that. So you do want to look into that now. I would say do your homework a little bit on that now. Wherever you're from, think about, look into, remember I showed you that map. Find your state, figure out, okay, do they let me do that? Because that might help you decide where, the student's going to be looking to college for college options. If that's, especially if they have a lot of money that you'd be kind of leaving on the table by not staying within your state line. So definitely check that out. And then we talked about the deadlines already. Last category of type of where the money's coming from is the other category. So these are things like outside scholarships. So when I describe outside scholarships, I describe them as either they're local in your backyard, like maybe where you work as a parent. Do you have something at work that your employer offers that the student can apply for right there at your employer? That's a common one. Another one would be like local, meaning your local Walmart, your local Dunkin' Donuts. I saw the QR code on the Dunkin' Donuts store not too long ago. They had I think it was like a $5,000 scholarship students can apply for or stuff like that. So look at like local businesses, Elks Clubs. I know, like even if you're not a member, but sometimes they let you, I've seen all kinds of things over my time. So you can essentially apply for for all these types of things, and you could stack up some cash that way, like $250 here, 500, 1,000. All of a sudden, maybe you've won $2,000, and that can help you easily pay for the books or personal expenses or whatever, but they can add up. So I think, to me personally, the local outside scholarships are really important to look for because people like to give money to students who are in their backyard, and sometimes the pool of applicants is smaller than if you were to look on a more of a national level or more of a regional level for the applications, because there's going to be more people who are able to, apply for those because they're seeing the applications all over the place. So for example, like search engines, College Board has one, FastWeb is another big one that's been around for years. And there's a bunch, but I mean, like you can look up scholarships and use those search engines to start applying. Just make sure you're not make sure they're legitimate. You just want to make sure you're kind of watching and avoiding any scams. There are unfortunately a lot of people scamming us humans out of things every day. So try to make sure you're using reputable sources there. We do have on College App's site website, you can go under I have the College App website up. If you go under collegeav.com. Under resources and tools, we have two things. One is we have scholarships here. We have a scholarship every month, so and we always have something fun out here that you can apply for. So there's different things that we offer as well. But also, so that's under resources and tools, but also under our guides and articles. If you would, you can go under search for articles on scholarships here. And I know we have a couple in here that give you a bunch of different like ideas for you to try out. So beyond the College Board and FastWeb, there's articles in here that I know there's like there's listings of them in there. So try that out. And some of them don't require essays, like we don't require essays for hours, but some of them don't require essays. I know students don't love to apply for as many, that takes more time to do the essays, but some of them will require essays, so keep that in mind as well. And then another outside resource, of course, would be things like private loans that would help, kind of cover the gap of financial aid, like what we have at College Ave, but those are loans, so, you want to look for as much free money as you can get that you don't have to pay back. Because obviously that's what we all should want, right? So definitely search for that stuff. It's worth at least trying. Then you can say, at least I tried. And even if you can get, a little bit of cash from it, the scholarships and stuff, it'll help. All right. So I've mentioned this, we talked a little bit about this already throughout, but applying on time is super important because if you miss any deadlines, you might be out of luck. And I'd hate for the student to have to take a gap year just because deadlines were missed, or, go to a school they didn't really want to because, they missed the deadlines on applying for financial aid. So the federal aid, state aid, college and university money, and the outside scholarships, they all have some kind of deadline, for some or all of it. So be careful. And if I were you, I would probably, find yourself a system, even if it's old school paper, to track. Like I like Excel, so I use that for everything. But if you have like, okay, list all the schools, what's the deadline for admissions applications? What's the deadline for financial aid applications? Of the financial aid applications, which ones do they need from me? And making sure that you're getting all of the ones that each one wants. Because, it's just really important. So I don't mean to harp on that, but it really is important. So, all right, now, I'm going to talk about the FAFSA and filing it, and there's some lingo related to filing the FAFSA. So one thing I want to tell you is that each person who fills it out is called a contributor. It's the lingo you're going to see on the application. So I'm just throwing you the lingo here. So each person who fills it out. So the student is a contributor, the parent is a contributor, and if the parents file separate tax returns, both of them are contributors, essentially. So contributor is basically like a person who's filling it out.
This question was asked earlier. What if their parents are married, filing jointly? Do they both need to fill out FAFSA? Only one? Do they need to both give permission to access the tax forms, the tax information?
I actually went into the FAFSA today to double check that, and it says that only one of them has to be a contributor. So here's what the contributor is actually agreeing to. The contributor is agreeing to pulling in a tax return. So in order to pull in the tax data, because the tax data gets dumped into the FAFSA, And you have to give the IRS permission. You have to give FSA, Federal Student Aid, permission to pull it from the IRS. When there's a joint tax return, only one person has to give, only one per contributor has to give the permission to get that tax data dumped in there. They don't both have to give permission. It's only one of them.
Okay.
I did read that in the instructions. Now, the paper FAFSA isn't available, so I couldn't pull the PDF of that today to review that. Only the online form is available. I can't find there's no paper one for me to read the instructions, so I would have had to start filing the FAFSA to do it. But my guess is I don't think they're changing that for 26, 27. So I was reading the current application, but also each contributor, each person needs an FSA ID. So again, Federal Student Aid ID. So you do have to request that. So it's basically like a username and password to get in. Well, you have a username, but this is essentially your password to get in. So the student would need to do it, and the parent or parents who are doing the FAFSA have to get one. And I already mentioned the third bullet. There's an SAI that is calculated, the student aid index. And then after that, you do receive a information. You receive like a summary of everything that you filed, and that's called the FAFSA submission summary. So you'll get that. And then I mentioned this already, but the CSS profile is different. So you won't get an SAI on that, but I just wanted to point that I put that on here just in case, reminding you that the CSS profile is different. And if you need to file it for anyone, it's a separate application altogether. So here is my attempt at giving you the side-by-side comparison of which parent information do you include, depending on your family situation. So FAFSA, if the parents are married, then both go on the form. So their income for both parents goes on the form if they're married. If they're not married, but they live together, maybe one lives on floor 1 and the other one lives on floor 2. That has happened a lot over the years as things are more expensive and, heard a lot of stories there. So if that's you, if parents are not married, but they live together, they both have to go on the form because you're in on the same address. If the parents are divorced, separated, or never married, and they don't live together, the parent who provided more financial support during the last 12 months is on the form. Sometimes parents will say, well, we both provide the same amount of support. If that's the case, you fall into the second sub-bullet there, which is if both equal support, the parent with the greater income and assets is supposed to fill out the form. And that's straight, exact wording from FSA. If the parent is widowed, the widower would go on the form. That one person's information would go on the form, assuming they're not remarried. There is a tool called Who's My Parent? Wizard tool. That is, I have the link listed for you here on this slide, so that if you need it, will help you get to the answer if you are unsure. And then let's look at the CSS profile. So for that one, so all parents, step-parents, and parents' domestic partners should be included in the parental relationships section. Whether or not so there's skip logic that's built into the CSS profile. So whether or not, like you're going to go down a path, if you've got, if there are two parents or a biological parent and a step parent, or the parents' domestic partners, they're going to have you kind of fill it out in the parental relationship section, and then one or two people's information. If they're divorced, and there's no if they're divorced, if you're divorced or separated, or never married, only your information would go on the CSS profile. But you might be asked for that other parent to fill out their own CSS profile. So like a separate CSS profile. So does that make sense, Debbie? So all parents, so basically you may end up having to put down multiple people on, so up to two parents on the CSS profile, or and then up to two people on maybe a separate CSS profile if it's a divorce separated situation. So let me show you where you can find this out. So I'm going to go back over here to the CSS profile website. And remember how I showed you this link here? So where this is the main page, and right here on the left is where you can check which schools need what application. Okay, so let's look at American University in DC. They want domestic students to fill out the profile, and they want non-custodial parents to fill out their own profile. So whatever that family unit is, they want them to do a separate CSS profile application. So there may be up to 4 parents we're looking at here, or 4 people, because there could be, biological parent and a step parent in the one household, and then there could be the other biological parent and a step parent over here in the non-custodial household. So at most, you have 4 people. So that's the gist of what's happening there. But you can look at that list of schools as a guide as to whether or not you'll have to do it for certain schools. Okay, so I'm sure there's questions on that, and I'm happy to answer those as we go along. But that is the way the parent situation is in terms of who to include. Okay, now comparing the FAFSA and the profile, here are some differences of things that you need to know. So I've already told you that the 2024 income is used for the fall of 26, spring of 27 year for that FAFSA. So it's the most recent completed tax year was 2024. But that's what you're going to use. And you're going to use that for the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So it's both of them are looking at that same tax year. Sometimes you won't have to report assets on the FAFSA. It does have skip logic as well. And if you fall into a certain income level, then you may not have to fill out the asset section. So if it's more, it's a certain income level. I don't want to quote it, but it's something just above 50,000, I think. It's not going to require you to do assets in that level. So you'll know because it'll just skip right over that whole section and you'll move right along. If you don't fall into that, then you'll have to report your assets. So let's look at some of this stuff. So these are side-by-side comparisons for the most part, all the way down except for the last 2 rows. So for the FAFSA, it's the number of exemptions that were on your tax return that are used as your household size. On the CSS profile, it's the number in your family, like even if grandma's living with you, but you don't report her on their tax return, she gets to still count in your household size for the profile. The FAFSA doesn't take into account number in college anymore, but the profile does, which is helpful to you. And then I won't go through everything arduously, but I do want to point out the big ones. So, taxable income for the FAFSA is going to come in from the actual, you as a contributor saying, yep, you can download my stuff from the IRS into this form. The CSS profile doesn't have that relationship with the IRS, so you do have to enter it yourself. Untaxed income, that includes child support that you are receiving or paying out. So that's going to be on both forms. Retirement income that you've put back, let's say every month you put into money towards your 401k or your at the end of the year you do, or if you do like a Roth IRA or anything like that, the income is included on the CSS profile. It is not a taxable, excuse me, it's not on your tax return. So it doesn't actually show up on the FAFSA anymore, like your monthly amount that you put into untaxed income. Um, Foreign income, if you have someone, a parent who's, working overseas, that income does count on both forms for the 26-27 year. Cash savings and checking, both forms. Real estate and investment net worth, both forms. The 529 plans are different on the forms. On the FAFSA, it's just for the student that is applying for financial aid. On the CSS profile, it's for both the student and any siblings that they have. The FAFSA on the business, so let's say you own your own business. If it's just you owning your own business, as an employee, you're an employee, it's an employee of one. So you don't need to put your business net worth on the FAFSA because you're just one employee. If you have less than 100 employees, you don't actually have to put your net worth on the FAFSA either for businesses. This is for 26-27 because this is a change. So if you have any kids in college right now, the law has been changing for the last 2 years. You had to count certain things. Now it's changing again. So this is 26-27 we're talking about here. So if you are familiar with certain things now, and I'm saying that it's changing for 26-27. So sorry, that's the thing about financial aid. Sometimes this stuff, it depends on like federal law sometimes. So, or all the time. So things can change from one year to the next. For the CSS profile in terms of businesses, it doesn't matter how many employees you have. They want you to put in your net worth, which is your value of the business minus any debt against it. Let's say, if you were to sell your business today, how much do you have in, your the stock that you let's say you sell I don't know, candles. What is it if I sold like my whole candle business today, minus how much do I owe for all the wax and my glue, my ingredient in my glass jars and whatever debt I have against it, that is considered the quote unquote net worth. It's the equity that you have there. Speaking of equity, going back to the left side here, home equity is not included on the FAFSA, but it is on the CSS profile. Again, it's value minus the debt. So you're going to provide both fields there. What is the value? What is the debt I owe against it, which would be like a mortgage or a home equity loan is also debt against it. Farm. So this law is also changing again for 26-27. So bear with me here. This is 26-27 stuff. Farm equity. If it's your primary residence, you don't have to put it on the FAFSA next year. But if you own another farm where you're not residing, let's say you have like a soybean farm or a horse farm. It's not where you live, but 3 miles away, I've got a horse farm. You got to put that down as your farm on your FAFSA next year. Any kind of farm goes on the CSS profile. So all the farms, whether you live on it or don't, but it don't double count because if you're living on the farm, you have a house on the farm and actually grew up on a farm. So we had a house and then we had a barn and then we had another corn crib and things like that. So what is the value of your farm stuff? Your home equity, you want to count separately on the CSS profile. So, and then lastly, retirement value is not a field on the FAFSA, but you do have to put down what your total retirement value is on the CSS profile. It used to not be a required field. I don't know if it is this year, but technically that is a field. So I'm happy to answer questions about that. It does not go into the calculation of your need, but it is more of an FYI to the school as to how much you've saved over time in your retirement.
So Kat, there was a question about deferred comp. How is that handled?
So deferred compensation, like the retirement or otherwise, like
This,
stocks or something where you're not getting paid on it now, but you're
yeah, this person didn't specify, but sometimes actually, well, I mean, it
yeah.
could be either where you can take your
Mm-hmm.
compensation and defer it, into a
Mm-hmm.
plan, and other times
Yeah.
it's, you're getting like what you're saying, stock
Mm-hmm.
and option.
Yeah, like, so I guess I would think about it this way. And I'm sorry I don't know from experience on that, but um, like in terms of my own self, but if it's um if it's showing if you received it in 2024 as either a taxable item or it was something you were given that year that you have access to from 2024 as untaxable income, then you should put it down. If it hasn't touched a tax return yet and it's not something that you have access to because it's been kind of officially deferred, I don't think I would count it because it's not really available. It's not available to you whether it's, like it hasn't been given to you yet.
Right, right, right.
So I would say no if it hasn't been given to you yet. And when you think about it, like, you get let's say you have a 401k. Well, that technically hasn't been given to me yet because I'm not retired yet, but it has been given to me because it's sitting in an account and I have a, 401k sitting there. In the example you just
And
gave,
you can actually access it. You might get a penalty, but you can actually,
correct.
take the money.
Right. So I guess I would think about it as has it been given to you yet where it's accessible in some manner? And that's probably how I would answer that if I
Okay.
were filling it out. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Regardless of what happens, first of all, we're all humans, so there's unfortunate cases where maybe you lose a job or something like that. That would be called like, okay, that's a special condition, that's a special circumstance where I might want the school to do a PJ on that, which I said earlier was a professional judgment to, you know what, my 2024 year was terrible. Um, well, it was good, but then in 2025, I lost my job. I really need you to look at my 2025 income because now I'm on a whole new path. And the schools can do that for you. So you just need to ask. The CSS profile is nice because it'll actually allow you to put that on the form versus like the FAFSA doesn't have any space for that. So you would have to write like a separate email or letter or call somebody and ask for what's your process so that I can have you reconsider you know, our eligibility using my more current situation. So,
And maybe one
um,
other thing to clarify, Kat, on both the FAFSA and the CSS profile, once the forms are submitted, can anybody kind of pull them up and make a change? Like, meaning, no, I don't mean any, I mean like the person who submitted it, like they say, oh my gosh, I realized I made a mistake in what I wrote for my checking account. Can they
yeah,
fix it?
you can fix your FAFSA. The CSS profile doesn't allow you to edit it, although I think they were letting you edit certain fields now. Um, so you know what? So definitely on the FAFSA, if you make a mistake, you can go back and edit the FAFSA. That I know for sure.
But how do you know that the school has or hasn't actually pulled the information yet?
Well, that's the trouble.
Yeah.
So
So
that's exactly what I was going to say next, which is you should see Debbie is very good at this because she anticipates all the questions and she's been doing this a while, so she really knows her stuff. So basically you should honestly, you should contact the school, each school, um, to tell them what you're about, like what your situation is, because depending on the time of year, if they've already downloaded your FAFSA, they may not download any corrections that you've
Right.
sent.
And you
They
don't know
lock it.
looking at your account whether it's been downloaded or not. The only way you know is if you contact the school to find out if
Yes.
they pulled the information.
Yeah, because there is a certain point where they lock it because you can't edit like if otherwise they'd have people maybe editing like, oh, well, my cash savings and checking is now $1,000 less because I had to buy something. Like that's not a feasible, reasonable process flow because so they lock it at a certain point and they don't bring any more in. So yeah, so that's what, depending on the timing, regardless of the timing, just call them or do an online chat with them or email or whatever and try to get the answers to what do I do?
Mhm.
So, okay. Moving on, when are you notified? So it depends on your plans, but if you're applying via early decision, which is like, I know exactly what school I want to go to, I'm applying. If I'm accepted, I'm going. So, I've had my heart set on, you know, Auburn. I'm applying early decision, and that process usually is going to, at schools, is going to take place between November and December. So they usually have like an admissions deadline of around November 1st to November 15th. Financial aid deadline is usually around the same time. And then you're usually notified like in December or maybe early January about your financial aid. So it's the earliest thing. Early action is where you're not sure exactly that you want to go to, let's say, Syracuse, but you know that you want to apply early and kind of get this thing done. So you apply to a couple schools early action if the school offers that. Not every school offers early action. Um, and you'll hear earlier than if you applied like kind of with the mainstream group, which is called regular decision. So regular decision, so early action is like, okay, I kind of have narrowed this down to like 2 or 3 or 4 schools. I just want to apply early, get it done. Their early action deadlines might be the same as early decision, like November, December, but you'll probably hear, maybe not by December or January, but maybe you'll hear by February or January or something like that. So it's kind of like a little bit of an in-between hybrid type of thing. Regular decision is more like March deadlines for financial aid. And most likely will hear, or actually, regular decision usually has like February deadlines. So jot that down. Regular
Oh, for
decision
financial aid, yeah, like
for
between
financial
like
aid is usually
February 1st, February
February.
15th, the latest, yeah,
Yeah. And then you hear about it in March or April. So you
right.
get your financial aid offer or award letter in
But
like
but
March or April.
but families with students applying early decision, early action, those maybe not early action as much, but early decision can be like November 15th. Some of them are even November 1st, the same
Oh,
time
yeah.
as the student's application. And I think parents don't realize that. And so it's like, wow, like either they missed the
Right.
deadline or it comes up very quickly.
Yeah, and then in which case you would have to just forego early decision and go with regular decision probably at that point.
Yeah, yeah.
So and also early decision, once you're kind of locked in. So that's like if you have one school you're sure you want to go to, it's like your dream school or something like that. Um, if you have any thought that there's more than one school, then you're not looking at early decision because that's not for you. You're looking at early action or regular
Or,
decision.
and if you've run the net price calculator in early decision school, even though it's like, the dream school, which I don't like that word, but, and you can't afford it, think twice
Yeah,
about applying, because that net price
twice.
calculator, usually for the early decision schools are pretty accurate.
Mm. Good advice there. Um, Rolling or open admission are schools that there's some that do like, hey, you can apply anytime during the year and we'll let you know your financial aid within a couple of weeks of that. And then, we just kind of do it all year round. There's fewer of those, but they do exist. Community colleges are definitely that way, but there are some 4-year schools that have rolling admission as well. Here's an example of a calculation. So of need. So you've got your cost minus the SAI equals need, which I showed you earlier, the formula. So let's assume this person's cost is 75,000 at the school, which includes all those categories I told you about earlier tonight. I'm subtracting the SAI that was calculated from my FAFSA at 35,000. My need is now 40,000. So it's 75 minus 35 equals 40. Now, how much can the school give me based on how much need is calculated? So the form says I need 40,000, but the actual amount of financial aid I was offered was only 25,000 out of the 40,000 I needed. So my actual cost is 50,000. So even though it said my calculated amount was that I could contribute 35,000 at this school that I'm using an example on, I'm actually going to have to pay $50,000 out of pocket, because here's why. Not every school can meet your full need. So there are some schools that can, but they are not as most schools can't. So they're not going to be able to meet 100% of your need. So you do have to look at that bottom line, and understand that, okay, this is not just a 1-year decision here. This is a multi-year decision. Yes, this is 1 year I'm looking at, but if I had to pay 50,000 every year with a little bit of a gap, because my form says I can pay 35, so I'm already gapped by $15,000 that year, that's going to snowball over multiple years, and you might end up having to borrow more, obviously. You're either pulling it from your income, your assets, or taking out loans. So those are the 3 places you're pulling it from. Unless, you're getting a gift from grandma or
I was
something
just gonna say a good
as a
there,
one-off.
right?
Yeah. Or you win the lottery, of course, which happens. Somebody just won big recently on those. So that's my example there. Federal Pell Grant qualifications, there's 3 different ways you can qualify. Either it's based on the poverty guidelines. So if you Google poverty guidelines, it's basically, it's the federal government that puts those out. They're used for a variety of things in this country, but that is what's being used behind the scenes. So in order to get the maximum Pell Grant, which this year is $7,395, it's based on the percentage of poverty guidelines based on your family size and your state of residence. So, or if you didn't file a tax return, you would qualify for you could qualify for the maximum Pell. Let's say you didn't meet that first threshold there. They will take a look at, okay, well then you would fall into the calculation of your Pell is equal to 73.95 minus whatever your SAI was calculated to be. So let's say if your student aid index was $6,000, then max Pell is 73.95 minus $6,000 SAI calculation. Your Pell would be $1,395 this year. Okay. But let's say your student aid index is calculated was $10,000. Well, is $10,000 bigger than 7,395? Yes. So that math doesn't work. So you wouldn't qualify anything in that second way to figure out whether you get any of that money. So 73.95 minus $10,000 is a negative number, so you wouldn't qualify in that second threshold there. Lastly, if you didn't meet those first 2, they look at you on the third way, which is, can you qualify for the automatic minimum Pell? So there's another, it's based on a different percentage of the poverty guideline amounts. So it's giving you a little bit more leeway on that. So if you don't qualify for that, then you wouldn't end up getting a Pell Grant at all. That's okay. I mean, you're still being considered for other things, but I'm just telling you kind of how the Pell Grant's calculated here. And also next year in 26-27, the One Big Beautiful Bill has a lot of provisions that are related to financial aid. And if your SAI is twice the maximum Pell Grant, which for this year it would be 2 times 7,395. If your SAI is bigger than that, then you don't qualify at all. So that's going to be there for next year. Okay, so those are the ways to get Pell. Your federal direct loans for students, I have the dollar amounts listed here on the right. If the student is a dependent undergrad, they'll qualify for up to $5,500 as a freshman, $6,500 as a sophomore. Juniors and seniors can get up to $7,500 as dependent students. The interest rate this year is 6.39%.
Probably should move
Oops,
this
sorry.
year.
The interest rate for this year is 6.39%. And the origination fee, which is essentially deducted from your loan amount you take, is 1.057%. So if you borrow 5,500, what is that? Let's do that math. So 5,500 times 0.0157. $86.35 would be deducted from your 5,500, and that's what the school would net, which is $5,413.65. So there's an origination fee on federal loans, is my point here. So the student loan, this is for the students to borrow. The origination fee is 1.057. The interest rate is fixed, but it does change every year. So if your loans are anything between July 1st and June 30th, let's say it'll be July 1st of 2026, anything that originates beyond that for 1 year is going to get whatever rate was set for that year. So the rate does change every July 1. Okay, so those are the federal direct student loans. The parent loans, which are the parent loans for undergraduate students, so that one is a big one that's changing next year. Okay, right now you could borrow up to the cost of attendance minus any financial aid that you have. So if you have other kids in college and you've been borrowing a PLUS loan, please note that that is changing for next year. This year, you can borrow up to the cost minus financial aid. Next year, you can only take out $20,000 annually per child. And you have a lifetime cap of $65,000. Now, if you and I are doing the math on that, that does not equate you taking out $20,000 a year for 4 years, because you take out 20, 20, 20, and now all of a sudden you don't even have 20 left for the fourth year. So, but this is all part of the new bill. So for 26, 27, you can only get 20,000 a year per child, and you can only do a maximum of 65,000 total for that child. Okay. This year, the interest rate is 8.94%. The origination fee deducted is 4.228%, which is pretty significantly higher than this one for the student loan. The student loan, this is actually a pretty good deal. You get a 6.39% rate. 1.0, yes, there's an origination fee, but it's not huge. It was the 80 some dollars for a $5,500 loan. Not too bad. Over here, though, if you're taking out a PLUS loan of 20,000, let's say you did the 20, oops, do that again, 20,000 times 0.04228, so $845.60 is a fee on a $20,000 loan. Now all of a sudden you're talking about some bucks. So that's going to be deducted from your $20,000 loan. So you only net 19,154 in that example. So I just want to make sure you're shopping, customers shopping, know what you're doing before you borrow. You can do a combination of things, whether you're doing like some through the Parent Plus loan, some through savings, some through income, some from grandma, whatever the case is. But this is how the plus loan is structured. So that rate will change next July 1 as well. So this is the current rate. And if you happen to have taken a Parent Plus loan for the student before, that's the student who's applying for financial aid. If you took a loan, a federal plus loan before July 1 of 2026 for that student, you do get grandfathered in. So you have 3 years of the regular, the current rule of uncapped borrowing, cost minus aid, or until they complete their program, whichever is shorter. But you would have had to have taken a plus loan right now, this year we're in, before July 1 in order to be grandfathered in. So, any questions on that? This is the new law, that's the big beautiful bill law that's kicking in for July 1 of next year. There is a chance there's a negotiated rulemaking process that happens, which is a whole different conversation, but that is happening starting next Monday in the government. So I guess there's a chance that some of this could be altered, but I would just kind of take it based on what the law is. And then if they reverse anything, we'll see what happens. But I think just bank on this for now because this is what the current law says. So Your private loans, if you needed a private loan instead of the Federal Plus loan, or in addition, if you want to do it in lieu of, I would say in lieu of a Federal Plus loan, excuse me, you can borrow up to the cost minus financial aid. The interest rates from different lenders are fixed or variable. And usually there's no origination fees for those. For most of the programs, there are some that do have fees, but for the most part, there aren't any. So, rounding third here or beyond, almost at home plate. My last slide here is, okay, you've applied for financial aid. What do you do next? Again, you're gonna get that award letter whenever those happen, which, depends on that timing of early decision versus early action and regular decision. And you compare them. You decide the fit socially, academically, emotionally, financially, where's the best place for the student to go. And you review it for the one academic year, and you just definitely take into consideration that it is a multi-year decision typically. So you want to make sure that you're kind of thinking ahead about that. So with that said, what kind of questions do we have, Debbie?
Okay, so a few questions that you hadn't touched on. Somebody's asking, what figure do you use for income if you are a business owner but had negative income on your personal tax return?
So if you filed a tax return, that's what's going to pull over into the FAFSA. So if you have a negative AGI, adjusted gross income, you're going to report it as that, or you're going to report whatever was on your tax return on the CSS profile. The FAFSA is automatically going to pull it in anyway, because you, as a contributor, are going to tell the FAFSA that it's okay to do that. So the IRS is going to push that out to the school. So if you're filing a tax return, that's going to come through on the FAFSA. So if you have a negative income, the CSS profile schools, some of them do ask you for tax returns because they actually want to see more information about that. So if it's a FAFSA only school, they don't all ask you for tax returns, but some of them might. So just be prepared for that, to explain like, okay, it's negative, but was it because you had to write off, you had a loss on your sales, so you sold X number of income, you had so much income, but then you had so many expenses, they offset it, and that's how you got into the negative. Like sometimes the schools will want to see the tax returns to see, okay, what exactly happened, and they might want you to explain kind of your situation. So, did you have a fire in your building, and you had like a total loss on some of the property that was, for the building, or, that type of thing. So I would just say, be prepared to maybe have to show or have a conversation with someone about your situation. In terms of like how the numbers fall out, sometimes schools, like, it's going to depend. Sometimes they on the FAFSA, the AGI being negative essentially is the same as a zero. So it's like, you're going to be needier on paper. So they're going to calculate your financial aid accordingly. That may also mean that you're going to qualify for more in Pell Grant. You also may not have to report assets, that type of thing. If you had a loss, because if your income is bumping you out of having to report assets on the FAFSA, that might happen as well. But I just want to caution you that the CSS profile, though, they might look at it differently. That's for those schools.
So Kat, there's a question about, and I'll just generalize it. What if somebody else, a relative or someone, let's say, is willing to pay towards tuition? Um, uh, uh, should they pay it directly to the college? And if they do, does that money get considered, does it go against the yearly gift limit? So let's just say it's a grandparent who wants to
Yeah.
pay towards college.
Um, well, I don't know the tax laws on gifts like that. Like, I don't know, I don't want to give advice on like dollar amounts of that, but like let's say the grandparent hands the money over to um the parent, and the parent then uses that money to pay the business office towards their bill, which I think is what I'm hearing,
Yeah.
right? Um, I don't know the tax implications of receiving said gift directly, like if the parent got the gift. So I'm not sure if I'm the best person to ask. I think I would probably say a financial advisor might be better for that, or like like an H&R Block or somebody who does taxes. Only because I don't know what the tax implication of that is. What I can tell you though is that if somebody sends money directly to the college and says, please apply this money towards my this person's bill, the business office would apply the money. Um, but in terms of the gift part, I don't know. I would be, I'm sure it happens, grandparents paying directly or someone paying on behalf just to help out. I recently was on a college campus in Rhode Island this summer at a admitted student event, and the grandmom was there with the mom was there, the grandmom was there with the daughter, and the grandmom said, well, I want to be able to help a little bit, so I want to be able to take out at least some loan for her so that she doesn't have any skin in the game on this $1 amount. I can help out a little bit, maybe $10,000 or something like that. So I mean, it does happen periodically, but I'm careful on the tax implication of it because I really don't know. But
Okay, that's fair enough.
yeah.
So somebody actually asked, and you started mentioning this stuff before, that they said on FAFSA that it says that you're exempt from reporting your assets if the AGI is under 10,000, 60,000. And if there's
60, yeah, that's right.
any Schedule C, which is
The
also,
business taxes. Yeah.
yeah, plus or minus 10,000. But what if
Okay.
you meet the AGI limit, but had a Schedule C that has more than the 10,000 loss? Are they still exempt from reporting assets?
Um, it might, I don't know if it's an and statement or an or statement, but it's probably an or statement in the law, in the regulations on that. So it's probably like if you meet this or this, it probably pulls out, doesn't make you report the assets, I'm guessing. You could Google that and you would find it's basically the regulation handbook that the financial aid administrators have to use from what's called IFAP. And it would pull you could read the handbook that has that, but I think it's probably an or statement. So if you meet one or the other, then you're okay. But I'd have to look it up.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah,
so
when in doubt, I always look it up because there's so many nuances, but
okay, two more good questions. So somebody was asking, they understand that you're giving permission for FAFSA to pull the information from the IRS. So that's kind of automatic, and none of us are now submitting the actual tax information. But in terms of assets, people are obviously doing that part on their own. And so the question is, how do the colleges verify that parents filling out FAFSA or are actually sharing accurate asset information?
yeah, I mean, well, there's a trust level. Technically, the FAFSA has a before you're signing off on
Because
it.
you're not like connecting up your, your
Yeah,
investment accounts or your bank accounts, so they can't verify it.
right. Technically, you're supposed to be truthful on the form. So there's like technically a penalty for putting down inaccurate information there. I'll just say that out loud because it is a piece when you're signing off on the FAFSA, you're technically signing that you're being truthful. However, the other thing is if something doesn't look right, the financial aid administrator may ask you to prove it. So, for example, Here's an example that happened all the time. Somebody has interest income that doesn't seem to coincide with the amount of assets that they reported. Let's say they put $1,000 of interest in, or $1,000 of interest income comes through, and they reported they only had $500 in the bank. Well, that math doesn't work, because you can't earn $1,000 of interest income and not have any, only have $500 in the bank. So they might question something like that, where there's a sort of a disconnect. Let me tell you though, there are, so many applications that some schools are not going to be able to go out and ask every little question on every little thing. A lot of times they are depending that you're being truthful on the application. But if something does look funny, it might kick out, where they might come back and ask you for more information.
So maybe just explain, there is something called a verification process that
There
you
is, yeah.
selected
So
for.
yeah, so let me say this. So there is a verification process. Here, two things. One, if it's the FAFSA, if it's a school that only uses the FAFSA, that means they only are using what the Department of Education requires them to verify. So it's kind of like a subset of people who, they're asked to verify certain things. And verify might mean like something you got picked for verification, because so they're having to verify things. It can vary. It could be an identity thing, it could be income. There's different groups. So the FAFSA kicks out certain people to have the school verify certain ones. On schools that use the CSS profile, they may choose to verify more than what the FAFSA needs them to do. So I worked at a school that was 100%. We verified 100% of our applicants, which means we needed tax returns from 100% of our financial aid applicants that were coming to the school. So and there was a lot more scrutiny on that kind of interest income, rub that in my example that didn't really match up. So we were like looking at every application very much with a fine-tooth comb. You may say, and I didn't really say this earlier, but you may say to yourself, well, why do the schools use the CSS profile? Why do they need all that extra information? Because those are the schools that have the most money to spend on institutional money to give you. So they're very, they scrutinize more, because they have a lot more money to give than maybe a school that's only using the FAFSA. And so therefore they're picky about what they're looking at. And so they might ask you for tax returns. They might ask you for, hey, can you just tell us more about your home value, because it doesn't seem to make sense, or whatever the case is. They might even look up your home on Zillow or other things to find out what the value of your home might be versus what you reported, things like that. So I would just say, the assets may or may not be verified by the schools, but just come in as close as you can to what you have, and if they ask you questions, you'll just have to respond.
Honestly, my advice that we give families is, when you're filling out the FAFSA and the CSS profile, honestly, take a screenshot of your assets, of the whatever the accounts are that you're reporting. Just take a screenshot to prove that that's the dollar amount on the day that you use that information to fill out FAFSA, and then you just have the
Yeah.
proof. If at some point, if they may, ask for it or not, but, better to just have it in the file than to scramble and say, oh my God, how am I going to prove that it was that amount on that day when I filled out FAFSA?
Yeah, good suggestion there. And I'll also say, and I didn't say this earlier, so for you, folks that are still here, thank you for hanging on. Here's another thing that's good to know, which is that the formula that is used to calculate how much you can afford, the income is treated differently than the asset section. So they pull more from your income section than your asset stuff. It's broken down much more fractionally on the asset side. So, $500 here, $700 there in the asset section doesn't really matter that much in the bottom line. It's just good to know. I mean, it's broken down a lot because they give you lots of allowances within the formula based on different things. And so, the income, they definitely are taking a higher percentage from. So
Okay, Kat, amazing. As always, a ton of information. I'm sure people who listen tonight, and again, thank you as Kat thanked you to staying on to the end. We'll probably still need to go back and relook at some of the things that were discussed because there was a lot here. But I hope that people just, walk away from tonight with a better understanding about the process. Most people are going to be filling out FAFSA in the next, 4 weeks or so. If your student is applying to one of those 300 and something, CSS profile schools, you're going to fill that out. Now you're just more aware of what that all means, how the schools use this information, and really most important, do not miss the deadlines, particularly for CSS profile, and particularly if your student is applying early admission. It's just, as the colleges are kind of strict on deadlines for students, they're also strict on deadlines for the financial aid forms.
yes. Yep. Debbie, you're awesome.
Oh,
Thank you everybody for staying on.
Is
okay.
there a
As always,
recording? Is there a recording going out?
yes, the recording will go out tomorrow.
And
And
and the
it
deadlines, are they different for every school, or is there just one deadline
Yes.
that we have to worry about?
no, so
Different.
deadlines for each school for when they want the financial aid forms filled out can vary. Like, honestly, for the early admissions process, it could be November 1st, could be November 15th, it could be November 20th. So definitely check every school. And the same applies for even regular decision. It could be January 15th, it could be February 1st. So they all vary a little bit. You have to, as Kat suggested, and we also recommend, create a spreadsheet of all the schools your student is applying to, have every deadline on there. Deadline for when the application is due, deadline for financial aid forms, deadline if there's different essays that are needed for merit scholarships. So just research and have a spreadsheet with all the deadlines.
And you are going to send the slides out, right, Debbie? Someone had
Yeah.
asked that.
Yeah, yeah.
Saw popped up. Yeah.
Yes. Okay,
So,
everyone. Have a
thank
good
you.
night. See you soon. Bye.
Thank
Thanks, Kat.
you. Bye.